Hello, so my name is Brian Jacobs, and a few months ago, a group of four of us from different disciplines set up a collective called Crater Lake and Company, and we created Crater Lake to help marketers pull together all of the data, research, insights at their disposal into a sort of clear, what we've described as a clear performance narrative, in effect, to try to make sense of it all. And in this series of interviews, we'll be speaking to well-known experts from different areas and different fields on what making sense of it all means to them. And I'm delighted to say that I'm joined today by Phil Smith, who's Director General of ISBA. So hi, Phil.
Hi, Brian.
So Phil, it strikes me that advertisers have got more data than ever before. I think we all know that. And they've got the opportunity to understand more about their consumers than they've ever had before. It's probably a bit overwhelming for most people, I would imagine, having all this data suddenly coming at you. But what do you think are the major difficulties they have to overcome to take sort of maximum advantage of this? What are the things that get in the way for them?
Thank you, Brian. Well, I think, as you say, there's been an explosion of data and a real lack of homogeneity when it comes to where it's coming from, what it looks like. A lot of it sits in silos, from the vendor as well as in the receiving company. And I think there's a lack of connectedness that's a part of the difficulty. I'm sure also that having the expertise to analyze and interpret all of this dissimilar data is another big factor. It's always been the case in my view that generating understanding from data has been part history, part science, and always been difficult to test hypotheses. And getting to a coherent working model of the world has always been hard, particularly when you take into account long-term impacts and externalities. And when you're looking at advertising in the context of other powerful leaders, especially in those kinds of businesses that have multiple contact points, it's a really difficult trick to pull off. And I think it's also always been possible to look at the same set of data and come up with wholly different interpretations and recommendations. And with today's focus on ROI, there's been a lot of the data that's being produced that's very focused on proving immediate cause and effect. I think it's really striking when you look at the difference between attribution models and the kind of data that's coming out of, say, ThinkBox's econometric-based work to see the difference in the world that they're painting. And the other thing that has to be said, of course, is a lot of the data is irrelevant. It comes with a lot of spin, and there's certainly a fair amount that's designed to make either the seller or the buyer look good.
Yes, and to confuse everybody all the more.
Yeah.
Do you think, it's interesting, isn't it? You've got this sort of great rise in proprietary data. Advertisers have got so much better, just over my time sort of in the business, at looking at data, collecting data. And there's been this great sort of increase in the number of advertisers setting up internal departments to make the most out of all of this and make sense of it all. And building systems that seem to coincide with all this seems to coincide with the sort of growing demand for industry data, so sort of generic type data. Do you see this as a sort of bit of a dilemma, really, isn't it? A bit of a dichotomy between, on the one hand, proprietary data, and on the other hand, industry-wide data.
Yeah, I think they're two sides of the same coin, really. That first-party data is great, and it's the stuff that you can really rely on. But it does tend to focus on existing customers. It does focus on near-in prospects, and sometimes misses that bigger picture. And what we've not had in industry data is a really good, solid data set that's accountable and has a lack of bias with it. So it's not really been a surprise from where I've been sitting. It was certainly a clear gap on the clear gap on industry data as I came into the job. And it's been by far the biggest call from members since the first day that I joined.
I suppose your members also, we tend to sort of think of the really big guys, don't we? But obviously you've got a broad spread of members, I suppose, who don't, I sort of merrily say, well, they're busy building departments. But I guess some of the smaller people, the industry data is vital for them.
I think it is. I think it's really big for the big guys too. But of course, the big guys are changing, and many of those businesses that grew up with a very much digital first party data mindset. But the more their activity starts to exploit all of the tools that are available, the more they need that industry data to sit alongside the first party.
Do you think that it seems, just from looking at it from the outside, that ISBA these days is working very well and very closely with the agency side of the IPA, and yet on an individual basis you keep reading about lack of trust and concerns about contracts and all that kind of stuff. What do you think can be done to improve the situation as an individual company, on an individual company level?
Well, I certainly think there are things that we can do to help, and I'll talk about individual companies in a moment as well. I think the first thing to do is to make sure that you start by understanding this is not going to be helped if we treat it as a blame game. But by the same token, it's really important to understand the commercial motives that every party has coming into their relationships. And we work with the IPA and the agency community wherever we can find common interest. Climate and diversity would be obvious examples of that. Creative pitch processes and practices, another area where it's easy to align. It's been more difficult for us where interests have become misaligned or conflicted over a long period of time, as in media. But absolutely, we do seek to foster sustainable agency relationships. We believe that's in the best interest of our members. And those have to be based on trust in capabilities alongside an alignment of interests. And for us and for members, initiatives like our media services framework are designed to bring clarity to the commercial underpinning of the relationship, provide a better chance to manage appropriately and effectively. So if there are things that I would say advertisers can do individually, is make sure you make use of all of the tools that are there and being created for you by ISBA, which is the only body that's there to work solely on behalf of advertisers. And I'd say the first thing that they could do is look at their current set of media arrangements up alongside our latest media services framework, which came out last month, and see where the gaps are and seek to understand why.
Yeah, well, everybody is trying to make sense of it all, as you say, Phil. But thanks very much indeed for your insights today, and thanks for joining us in this interview.
Huge pleasure.